Jake Morrison walked down the long metal hallway of the battleship New York. His boots made soft sounds on the floor. He was tired, very tired. 3 months of fighting the bug-like Vex had worn him down to nothing. All he wanted was to sleep in his own bed and forget about the war for a while. The smell of metal and recycled air filled his nose as he got closer to his quarters. Home at last. He pressed his hand against the scanner next to his door. The light turned green, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Jake stepped inside and froze. There was someone in his room. A small figure sat curled up in the corner like a scared animal. The person had pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the room lights. Large violet eyes stared at him with pure terror. Jake blinked hard. Maybe he was seeing things. 3 months of combat could do that to a man. But no, the figure was real. It was a girl, maybe 17 or 18 years old by human standards. She had the thin build of the Kalari people he had seen in the war briefings. Her silver hair fell around her shoulders like liquid mercury. She wore simple white clothes that looked too big for her small frame. The girl pressed herself harder against the wall when she saw him looking at her. Her whole body shook with fear. Jake had seen that look before. It was the same look prey animals got when they knew death was coming. But why was she afraid of him? He was just a tired soldier who wanted to rest. Jake raised his hands slowly, to show he meant no harm. The girl whimpered and covered her face with her arms. She said something in a language he did not know. The words sounded musical, but filled with panic. Jake wished he had paid more attention to the language lessons they gave before deployment. He moved very slowly to his desk and picked up a small device. The universal translator hung to life in his hands. Most soldiers carried them, but Jake rarely used his. Fighting bugs did not require much talking. He pointed it toward the girl and spoke in his calmest voice. "Hello, I am Jake. I will not hurt you." The device made soft beeping sounds as it worked to translate his words. The girl looked up at him through her fingers. Her violet eyes were wet with tears. She said something back, and the translator spoke in Jake's language. "Please do not eat me yet, great predator. I know I am small, but I will try to be filling." Jake nearly dropped the translator. Eat her. She thought he was going to eat her. The idea was so crazy that he almost laughed. But the girl's terror was real. She truly believed he wanted to make her into dinner. Jake shook his head quickly. No, I do not eat people. I would never hurt you." The translator worked again, but the girl did not look relieved. If anything, she seemed more scared. She spoke rapidly, and the device struggled to keep up with her words. "The legends say humans play with their food first. They are kind to make the meat tender. Please, I accept my fate. My people sent me as tribute. I understand." Jake felt sick to his stomach. Her people had sent her here as food. They actually believed humans ate other thinking beings. Where had they gotten such a horrible idea? He knelt down slowly, staying far enough away so she would not feel trapped. The girl watched his every move like he was a dangerous wild animal. "What is your name?" he asked through the translator. "I am called Zira," she whispered. "I was chosen because I am young and my meat will be sweet." The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. This girl, this Zira, had been given to him like a piece of meat. Her own people had sent her to what they thought was certain death, and she had accepted it. The bravery in that acceptance made Jake's chest tight with emotion. He stood up slowly and moved to his small kitchen area. Zira's eyes followed him with the focus of someone watching their executioner. Jake opened his food storage and pulled out a ration pack. Military food was not great, but it would have to do. He heated it up and brought it over to where Zira sat. "Here, You must be hungry. He set the food down halfway between them and backed away. Zira stared at the meal like it might explode. She looked from the food to Jake and back again. Her confusion was clear on her face. You want me to eat. But why? Are you making me fat for later? Jake ran his hands through his dark hair. This was going to be harder than fighting the Vex. At least bugs were simple. They wanted to kill you, and you wanted to kill them back. This was different. This was about fear and misunderstanding that went deeper than any war. I am not going to eat you, Zira. Not today, not ever. I eat plants and animals that do not think, never people. She tilted her head like a confused bird. But the stories say, humans are the great devourers. You conquered the galaxy by eating your enemies. Your hunger knows no limits. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Was that really what the galaxy thought of humanity? That they were monsters who ate other thinking beings? No wonder so many species feared them. If he believed those stories about another race, he would be terrified. 2. He tried a different approach. Jake took some of the food from the tray and ate it himself. He chewed slowly and made sure Zira could see that it was just normal military rations. Processed vegetables and synthetic protein. Nothing that had ever been alive and thinking. See, this is what I eat, not people. Zira watched him eat with wide eyes. She looked at the remaining food on the tray. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out and took a small piece. She sniffed it carefully before putting it in her mouth. Her face showed surprise at the bland taste. It has no flavor of fear, she said quietly. I expected the food of predators to taste of blood and terror. Jake almost smiled at that. Military rations tasted like cardboard on a good day, but he could see this was progress. Zira was starting to question what she had been told about humans. It was a small step, but it was something. The rest of the evening passed in uncomfortable silence. Jake gave Zira his bed and made a sleeping area for himself on the floor. She protested, saying that livestock should not sleep in the masters. But Jake insisted. He had slept in worse places during the war. As he lay on the hard floor, Jake could hear Zira crying softly above him. She was trying to be quiet, but her sobs carried in the small room. Jake stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of life she had lived. What kind of stories had her people told her about humans? And how was he going to convince her that those stories were wrong? The next morning, Jake woke up with a sore back from sleeping on the metal floor. He sat up quietly and looked toward his bed. Zira was still there, curled up in a tight ball under the blankets. She was awake, though. Her large violet eyes watched him with the same careful attention as the day before. Jake stretched and tried to smile at her. She flinched and pulled the blanket over her head. Jake sighed and got ready for the day. He had hoped that one night might help her feel safer, but clearly it would take more time. He dressed in his uniform and gathered his things for duty. Before leaving, he set out another meal for Zira. This time he made sure to include only vegetables and fruits. Maybe if she saw he could survive without meat, she would start to believe his words. I will be back later, he said through the translator. Please eat something. Zira peeked out from under the blanket, but said nothing. Jake left for his shift, wondering if she would even be there when he returned. Maybe she would try to escape. He could not blame her if she did. His day was filled with the usual post-battle duties. Reports to write, equipment to check, and meetings with other soldiers, but Jake found it hard to focus. His mind kept going back to the scared girl in his room. During lunch, he sat with his friend Danny Cooper in the mess hall. You look like hell, Jake, Danny said between bites of his sandwich. Thought you would be happy to be back. Jake pushed his food around on his plate. Danny, what do you know about the Kalari people, The blue ones from the outer rim. Nice folks from what I hear. Why do you ask? Jake told him about Zira, about how she had been left in his room, and what she believed about humans. Danny listened with growing amazement on his face. She thinks we eat people. That is crazy, Jake. Where would they get an idea like that? I do not know, but she really believes it. She is terrified of me. Danny shook his head. You are probably the gentlest guy on this whole ship. You once spent your shore leave helping at that animal shelter on Mars Station. Remember? Jake did remember. He had always liked animals more than people sometimes. They were honest about what they wanted, but that did not help him now. What am I supposed to do with her, Danny? I cannot send her back to people who think I ate her, but I cannot keep her locked in my room either. Maybe talk to Doc Harper. She knows about alien psychology stuff. That afternoon, Jake went to see Lieutenant Commander Lisa Harper in the medical bay. She was a smart woman with kind eyes who had joined the military to help people rather than fight them. Jake explained his situation, and she listened without judgment. The Kalari are what we call a prey species, she said when he finished. They evolved being hunted by larger predators on their home world. Fear is built into their genes. And humans, well, we evolved as hunters. We have forward-facing eyes, sharp teeth, and we move like predators, even when we do not mean to. But I would never hurt her. I know that, Jake, but to her, you look like every nightmare her species has ever had. The fact that you are being kind probably makes it worse. In nature, predators sometimes play with their prey before killing. Jake felt frustrated. So what do I do? Be patient. Show her through your actions, not your words. Words are easy to fake. Actions are harder. That evening, Jake returned to his quarters to find Zira exactly where he had left her. She had eaten some of the food, but not much. She looked thin and pale. Jake wondered when she had last had a real meal. He decided to try something new. Instead of talking to her, he just went about his normal routine. He read a book, wrote a letter to his sister back on Earth, and watered the small plant he kept by his window. It was just a simple flower, but it made the metal room feel more like home. Zira watched everything he did with intense curiosity. When he watered the plant, she made a small sound of confusion. Through the translator, she asked, "Why do you care for the green thing? It cannot serve you." Jake looked up from his book. "It is beautiful. It makes me happy to see it grow. But what do you gain from its happiness? Nothing. I just like seeing living things do well." Zira stared at him for a long time after that. Jake could see her trying to understand his words. In her world, everything had to have a purpose. The idea of caring for something just because it was alive was foreign to her. On the third day, Zira got sick. Jake woke up to hear her making small whimpering sounds. Her blue skin had turned almost white, and she was shaking with fever. Jake felt panic rise in his chest. He did not know anything about Kalari medicine. He called Doc Harper right away. She came to his quarters with her medical kit and examined Zira carefully. The girl was too weak to be afraid. She just lay there breathing hard while the doctor worked. "It is just a fever," Doc Harper said. "Her immune system is fighting off some bugs she picked up, probably from the stress and poor eating. She needs rest and fluids." For the next 2 days, Jake barely left Zira's side. He took leave from his duties and focused on taking care of her. He gave her medicine every few hours, made sure she drank water, and used cool cloths to bring down her fever. When she had nightmares, he sat beside her and spoke softly until she calmed down. Zira was delirious for most of it. She talked in her own language, calling out for her family. Sometimes she seemed to think Jake was someone else. Once she reached out and grabbed his hand while she slept. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. On the second night of her illness, Zira woke up while Jake was changing the cool cloth on her forehead. She looked at him with clearer eyes than eyes he had seen since she arrived. "You are still here," she whispered through the translator. "Of course I am here. You are sick. But I am useless to you like this. A predator would abandon weak prey." Jake felt something break inside his chest. "You are not prey, Zira. You are a person. People take care of each other when they are sick." She stared at him with those large violet eyes. "I do not understand you, human Jake. You do not have to understand. Just get better." By the fourth day, Zira's fever broke. She sat up in bed and ate a full meal for the first time since arriving. Jake felt relief flood through him. He had been more worried than he wanted to admit. "Thank you," Zira said quietly. "You could have let me die. It would have been easier for you." "Why would I want you to die?" "Because then your problem would be solved." Jake sat down in the chair beside his bed. "Zira, you are not a problem. You are a person who needs help. That is what we do. We help people who need help." She tilted her head in that bird-like way. "Again, even when they cannot help you back. Especially then." Something changed in Zira's expression. The constant terror that had been in her eyes since she arrived began to fade just a little. She still watched him carefully, but now there was curiosity mixed with the fear. "Your people have strange ways, human Jake." Jake smiled. "Yeah, I guess. We do." That night, for the first time since arriving, Zira did not cry herself to sleep. Jake took that as progress. "Small steps," Doc Harper had said. This felt like a very small step in the right direction. As the days passed, Zira began to watch Jake more closely. She no longer hid under the blankets when he moved around the room. Instead, she studied everything he did with the focus of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Jake noticed her attention, but tried not to make it obvious that he saw her watching. Every morning, Jake did his exercise routine in the small space of his quarters. He did push-ups, sit-ups, and stretched his muscles. The first time Zira saw this, she pressed herself against the wall in terror. Through the translator, she whispered, "Are you preparing to hunt?" Jake paused in his exercises. "No, I am keeping my body healthy. If I do not use my muscles, they get weak." "But you are already strong enough to kill me. Why do you need to be stronger?" Jake thought about how to explain this. "I do not exercise to hurt people. I do it so I can protect people. And so I stay healthy as I get older." Zira looked confused. "You think about getting older, but predators live only for the hunt. I think about lots of things. My family back home. The books I want to read. The places I want to see when the war ends." She watched him finish his routine with new eyes. Jake could see her trying to understand why a predator would care about anything beyond its next meal. Later that morning, Jake had to go to a meeting with his squad leaders. He hesitated at the door, wondering if he should lock Zira in. But that seemed wrong. She was not a prisoner, even if she did not understand that yet. "I have to go to work," he told her. "You can stay here or walk around the ship if you want. No one will hurt you." Zira looked shocked. "You are not going to chain." "Why would I chain you?" "To keep your food from escaping." Jake felt that familiar sick feeling in his stomach. "You are not food, Zira. You are free to go anywhere you want." He left the door unlocked when he went to his meeting. When he came back 2 hours later, Zira was still there. She sat by his small window, looking out at the stars. Jake wondered what she was thinking about. "Did you leave the room?" he asked. "I went to the corridor, but I came back." "Why did you come back?" Zira was quiet for a long moment. "I saw other humans. They looked at me with curiosity, not hunger. One female with..." Yellow hair smiled at me. I have never seen a predator smile at its prey. Jake knew she was talking about Lieutenant Amy Foster, who worked in communications. Amy was friendly to everyone she met. What did you think about that? I think I do not understand humans at all. The next day, Jake decided to introduce Zira to some of his friends. He started with Danny Cooper, who was gentle and easy to talk to. Danny came to Jake's quarters after his shift ended. When he saw Zira, he smiled and spoke slowly through the translator. Hello, Zira. Jake has told me about you. Welcome to our ship. Zira stayed close to Jake, but she did not hide. She studied Danny with those large violet eyes. You are also a human predator. Danny laughed. I guess you could say that. But I mostly hunt for good food in the mess hall and interesting books in the library. You read the knowledge symbols. Books. Yes, I love reading. Do your people have books? Zira nodded slowly. We record stories and information. But I thought predators only cared about hunting. Well, this predator also likes poetry and stories about faraway places. Jake could see Zira thinking hard about this. Everything she had been told about humans said they should be simple killing machines. But here was Danny talking about poetry like it mattered to him. Over the next few days, Jake introduced Zira to more crew members. Doc Harper showed her the medical bay and explained how humans took care of their sick and wounded. Chief Engineer Bob Martinez let her see the engine room and talked about how humans built things instead of just destroying them. Each meeting confused Zira more. These humans did not act like the monsters from her people's stories. They were complex beings, with interests and feelings and dreams. Jake could see her struggling to fit this new information into what she had been taught. The real test came when the ship received a distress call. Jake was getting ready for bed when the alarm sounded. Red lights flashed and the captain's voice came over the speakers. All hands to battle stations. We have a civilian transport under attack by raiders. AT to target is 40 minutes. Jake immediately started putting on his combat gear. Zira watched with growing fear as he transformed from the gentle man she was getting to know into a warrior preparing for battle. Now you show your true nature, she whispered. The predator awakens. Jake paused in loading his weapon. Zira, we are going to help those people. The raiders are trying to hurt civilians. You go to hunt and kill. Yes, but only the raiders. Only the ones hurting innocent people. Zira shook her head. I do not understand the difference. Jake knelt down beside her. The difference is why we fight. We do not fight to take things or hurt the weak. We fight to protect people who cannot protect themselves. He left her in his quarters and went to join his squad. Through the ship's communication system, Zira could hear the battle preparations. She found her way to an observation deck where she could see outside the ship. When they reached the civilian transport, Zira watched human fighters launch from the New York. But instead of attacking the helpless transport, they went after the raider ships that were firing on it. She could see the difference on her scanner screen. The humans were protecting the civilian ship, putting themselves between it and the attackers. The battle was quick and brutal. Human pilots flew their fighters with skill and courage, taking hits meant for the transport ship. Zira watched one fighter pilot sacrifice his own ship to destroy a raider that was about to fire on the civilians' engines. When it was over, the first thing the humans did was send medical teams to help the wounded on the transport. Zira could see the rescue. Ships moving back and forth, carrying injured civilians to safety. She watched human doctors and nurses working to save people they had never met before. Among those rescue teams was Jake. Zira could see him on the transport's deck, helping to carry wounded passengers to the medical ships. He moved carefully, gently, making sure not to cause more pain to people who were already hurt. One scene made Zira's breath catch in her throat. A section of the transport's hull was collapsing. Several small Kalari children were trapped underneath the falling metal. Jake saw them and ran toward the danger instead of away from it. He threw himself over the children just as a large beam fell. It hit him in the back and shoulder, but his body protected the young ones beneath him. Other humans quickly came to help, lifting the beam off Jake and the children. Jake was hurt, but his first concern was for the little ones. Zira could see him checking each child carefully before allowing himself to be helped to his feet. When the rescue ships returned to the New York, Zira was waiting in the docking bay. She watched as Jake was brought in on a medical stretcher. His back was bleeding and his face was pale with pain. But when he saw her, he tried to smile. "The children are safe," he said through gritted teeth before the medical team took him away. Zira stood in the empty docking bay for a long time after everyone left. Everything she thought she knew about humans had been turned upside down. The terrible predator she had feared had risked his own life to save children of her own species. Children he did not know and who could give him nothing in return. That night, while Jake recovered in the medical bay, Zira sat by his bedside. She had asked Doc Harper if she could visit him. The doctor had smiled and said of course she could. "I do not understand you, human Jake," Zira said quietly. "My people told me humans were monsters who ate other thinking beings, but you almost died to save Kalari children." Jake's eyes were heavy with pain medication, but he tried to focus on her words. "We are not monsters, Zira. We are just people, trying to do the right thing." "What is the right thing?" "Protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Helping when we can help. Being kind when the universe is cruel." Zira touched his bandaged hand very gently. "I think I am beginning to understand. You are not predators at all. You are something else entirely." Jake smiled despite his pain. "What are we then?" Zira thought for a moment. "I do not have a word for it in my language. But I think you are the opposite of what we feared. You are guardians." While Jake recovered in the medical bay, Zira spent her time talking to other crew members about humanity's reputation across the galaxy. She was determined to understand how her people had gotten things so wrong about these strange beings, who called themselves Human Dot. She started with Captain Ben Rodriguez, who was kind enough to meet with her in his ready room. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much war. Zira sat across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap, and asked the question that had been bothering her. "Captain Rodriguez, why does the galaxy fear humans if you are protectors and not predators?" The captain leaned back in his chair and sighed. "That is a complicated question, Zira. We are feared, but probably not for the reasons your people think." He activated a holographic display that showed a map of known space. Different colored areas marked the territories of various species and empires. Most civilizations in the galaxy follow what we call the law of strength. The strong take from the weak. The powerful rule over the powerless. It has been this way for thousands of years. Zira nodded. This she understood. This is the natural order. The hunters and the hunted. But humans do not follow that law, Captain Rodriguez continued. When we first met other species, they expected us to conquer them or demand tribute. Instead, we offered to trade with them as equals. We shared our technology with species less advanced than us. We protected smaller civilizations from larger ones. The hologram showed human colonies and trade routes spreading across space. This confused everyone. In a galaxy where might makes right, we kept insisting that right makes might. We refused to attack civilians. We followed rules of war that most species had never heard of. We actually tried to help our enemies after we defeated them. Zira tilted her head in confusion. But why would that make others fear you? Because it was unpredictable. Other species could understand conquest. They could understand trade for profit, but they could not understand why humans would risk their lives for strangers or share resources with people who could not benefit them in return. Captain Rodriguez stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. The galaxy learned that humans were dangerous, but not in the way they expected. We were dangerous to tyrants and bullies, and those who prey on the weak. We became the species that other civilizations called when they needed help against oppressors. So, the fear comes from not understanding your motivations. Exactly. A predictable enemy is manageable. But humans, we do things that do not make sense to most galactic civilizations. We will fight impossible odds to save people we have never met. We will make peace with former enemies and help them rebuild. We will sacrifice our own comfort to ensure that others can live freely. Zira spent the next day in the ship's library, using the computer terminals to research human history. What she found amazed her. The records showed conflict after conflict where humans had intervened not for conquest or resources, but to stop stronger species from oppressing weaker ones. She read about the Arcturus incident, where a human fleet had placed itself between the warlike hegemony and a peaceful agricultural world. The humans had been outnumbered 10-1, but they had held their position until reinforcements arrived. They had lost 60% of their ships, but the agricultural world remained free. She learned about the vegan trade wars, where human merchants had organized a boycott against the consortium for using slave labor. The boycott had cost humanity billions of credits and valuable trade relationships, but it had forced the consortium to free their slaves. Most shocking of all, she read about the liberation of Kepler 442b. The insectoid dominion had been using the planet's humanoid population for food, just like Zira had feared humans would do to her. But when human forces liberated the planet, they did not take it for themselves. Instead, they helped the survivors rebuild their civilization and then left. Lieutenant Amy Foster found Zira in the library that evening, still reading through historical records. Amy sat down beside her and looked at the screen. "Heavy reading," Amy said with a smile. "Finding what you were looking for. I am trying to understand how my people could be so wrong about humans." Amy nodded thoughtfully. "It is not just your people, Zira. Lots of species misunderstand us. They see our military strength and assume we are conquerors. They see us refuse to back down from fights and think we are aggressive. But they miss the most important part." "What part is that?" "We only fight when we have to. And we only fight to protect others or defend ourselves, never for conquest or glory." Zira looked at Amy's kind face. "But your people must gain something. From this behavior, there must be a benefit." Amy shook her head. "Sometimes there is no benefit. Sometimes helping others costs us greatly. But we do it anyway because it is right." "I do not understand this concept of right." Right is when your actions help others instead of hurt them. When you choose to protect instead of destroy. When you put the needs of the innocent above your own comfort. That evening, Zira visited Jake in the medical bay again. His injuries were healing well, but he would need several more days of rest. She sat beside his bed and told him about everything she had learned. "Your species confuses the galaxy because you act against your own interests," she said. "This is seen as dangerous because it is unpredictable." Jake smiled weakly. "I guess when everyone expects you to be selfish, being selfless does seem strange. But Jake, I still do not understand why you do it. What do humans gain from protecting others?" Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about her question. "We gain the knowledge that we did the right thing. We gain the ability to sleep at night, knowing we helped instead of hurt. We gain a universe where the strong protect the weak instead of prey upon them. These are not physical gains." "No, they are not. They are something more important." Zira spent that night thinking about Jake's words. She had been raised to believe that survival was the only thing that mattered. But humans seemed to believe that how you survived mattered just as much as whether you survived. The next day, Doc Harper invited Zira to help in the medical bay. She wanted to understand how humans cared for their wounded. What she saw there changed her even more. The medical bay was full of patients from the recent battle. Some were human crew members who had been injured in the fighting, but others were raiders who had been captured. The same raiders who had been attacking the civilian transport. Zira watched in amazement as human doctors and nurses treated the wounded raiders with the same care they gave their own people. They set broken bones, treated burns, and gave pain, medication to beings who had been trying to kill them just days before. "Why do you heal your enemies?" Zira asked Doc Harper. "Because they are wounded and in pain. Once the fighting stops, they are patients, not enemies. But they were trying to harm innocent people. Yes, and they will face justice for that. But we do not let people suffer just because they made bad choices." Zira watched a human nurse carefully bandaging the arm of a Vex raider, the same species the humans had been fighting for months. The nurse worked with gentle hands, making sure not to cause unnecessary pain. "This makes no sense," Zira whispered. Doc Harper smiled. "It makes perfect sense if you understand what humans believe. We believe that every thinking being has value, even our enemies. We believe that showing mercy makes us stronger, not weaker. How can mercy make you stronger? Because when you show mercy to your enemies, sometimes they stop being your enemies. That Vex raider the nurse is treating, he has been asking questions about human culture. He wants to understand why we saved his life instead of letting him die." Zira looked at the Vex raider with new eyes. His insect-like features made it hard to read his expressions, but she could see something like confusion in his compound eyes. He was having the same experience she had had, trying to understand humans who acted nothing like the monsters he had expected. That evening, Captain Rodriguez called Zira to his ready room again. This time, he had a communication waiting for her. Her own people, the Kalari government, were asking about her status. "They want to know if you are still alive," the captain said. They seemed surprised. Zira looked at the message from her homeworld. Her people had expected her to be dead by now, consumed by the terrible human predator. The idea that she was not only alive, but healthy and well-treated was shocking to them. "What should I tell them?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Zira thought for a long moment. "Tell them that everything they believe about humans is wrong. Tell them that I have learned the truth about these beings. They are not the monsters we feared. What are they then?" Zira smiled, remembering her conversation with Jake. "They are guardians. The galaxy fears them not because they are evil, but because their goodness threatens those who would do evil." The captain nodded and began composing a response to her government. As he worked, Zira realized that she had found her purpose. She could not return to her old life, knowing what she now knew about humans. But maybe she could help bridge the gap between her people and these strange, wonderful guardians who had changed her understanding of the universe. 2 weeks later, Jake was back on his feet and cleared for duty. His injuries had healed well, though he still had some stiffness in his shoulder. Zira had barely left his side during his recovery, and Jake had grown used to her quiet presence. She no longer flinched when he moved quickly or spoke loudly. The constant fear that had defined her first days on the ship was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like trust. The change in their relationship became clear when Jake returned to his quarters after his first day back on duty. Zira was there waiting for him, but instead of cowering in the corner, she was sitting at his small table, reading one of his books. She looked up when he entered and smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. "How was your day, Jake?" she asked through the translator. The device had become so natural to use that Jake barely noticed it anymore. "Good. Tiring. But good," How was yours? I spent time with Doc Harper in the medical bay. She is teaching me about human medicine. I find it fascinating how much effort you put into healing. Jake sat down across from her. What do you mean? My people have medicine, but it is simple. We heal what we can and accept what we cannot. But humans, you fight against death itself. You refuse to let people die, even when nature says they should. Is that wrong? Zira shook her head quickly. No, not wrong, just very different from what I expected. Everything about your species is different from what I was taught. That evening brought news that would change everything. Captain Rodriguez called Jake to his ready room with an urgent message. When Jake arrived, he found the captain looking troubled. We just received word from Earth Command, the captain said. There is a delegation of Kalari officials coming to retrieve Zira. They will be here in 3 days. Jake felt his stomach drop. What does that mean for her? It means she goes home. Back to her people. Jake thought about Zira returning to a world where humans were seen as monsters, where her new understanding of his species would be dismissed as the delusions of someone who had been traumatized by her captivity. Sir, I do not think that is what she wants anymore. What she wants may not matter, Sergeant. This is a diplomatic situation now. Jake left the meeting feeling helpless. When he returned to his quarters, he found Zira exactly where he had left her. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What has happened? She asked. Jake told her about the delegation, about how her people were coming to take her home. Zira listened in silence, her violet eyes growing sad. They think you ate the real me, and that I am just an illusion you created to fool them, she said finally. Is that really what they believe? It is easier for them to believe that than to accept that their stories about humans were wrong. Jake sat down beside her. What do you want to do, Zira? She was quiet for a long time, staring out the small window at the stars. I cannot go back, Jake. I cannot pretend that I still believe humans are monsters. But I also cannot stay here forever as your responsibility. You are not my responsibility. You are my friend. The word friend seemed to surprise her. Do humans and Kalari become friends? I think we just did. Over the next 3 days, Zira spent her time learning everything she could about human culture and history. She talked to crew members, read books, and even watched human entertainment programs. She was preparing for something, though Jake was not sure what. The Kalari delegation arrived exactly on schedule. Their ship was small and elegant, built for diplomacy rather than war. Jake watched from the observation deck as it docked with the New York. He felt like he was watching Zira's freedom disappear. The meeting took place in the main conference room. Jake was allowed to attend as Zira's guardian, though he was not sure what that title really meant. The Kalari delegation consisted of 3 officials, all with the same pale blue skin and large eyes as Zira. They looked at the humans in the room with barely concealed fear. The lead delegate, an older male named Keth, spoke in accented standard. We have come to retrieve the gift that was given to your people. We hope that our offering was acceptable. Captain Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Ambassador Keth, Zira is not a gift. She is a person, and she has some things to say about her situation. Keth looked confused. The livestock has learned to speak your language. Impressive training. Jake saw Zira flinch at the word livestock, but she stood up calmly. I am not livestock, honored Keth. I am Zira, daughter of Mira, student of the healing arts. And I have learned things about humans that our people need to know. Child, you have been with predators too long. They have confused your mind. No, Zira said firmly. They have opened my mind. Everything we believe about humans is wrong. They are not predators who consume other thinking beings. They are guardians who protect the weak. The other Kalari delegates looked at each other. With concern, one of them, a female named Letta, spoke up. The trauma has damaged her reasoning. We should take her home for healing. Zira walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of the Kalari delegation. I am not damaged. I am educated. Watch this. She turned to Jake and held out her hand. Jake understood immediately and took her hand in his. The Kalari delegates gasped and stepped back, expecting to see him attack her. Instead, Jake squeezed her hand gently and smiled. Predators do not hold hands with their prey, Zira said. They do not nurse their prey back to health when they are sick. They do not risk their lives to save prey children from danger. She told them about Jake caring for her during her illness, about the rescue mission where he had protected Kalari children with his own body, about the human doctors who treated wounded enemies with the same care they gave their own people. The Kalari delegates listened with growing amazement. Finally, Ambassador Keth spoke. Even if these stories are true, you must return home. Your people need you. My people need the truth, Zira replied. And I cannot give them that truth if I go back to live in the same fear they do. She turned to address Captain Rodriguez. I have a proposal to make to both of our governments. The captain nodded for her to continue. Let me become the first Kalari cultural liaison to humanity. I can help both of our species understand each other better. I can work to correct the misconceptions that have kept us apart. Ambassador Keth looked shocked. You want to stay with the humans. I want to build a bridge between humans and Kalari. I want other members of my species to learn what I have learned, that the galaxy's most feared predators are actually its most reliable protectors. Jake felt pride swell in his chest. Zira had found her own solution, one that honored both her people and her new understanding. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. What would this liaison position involve? I would travel between human and Kalari worlds. I would teach my people about human culture and teach humans about Kalari culture. I would work to establish formal diplomatic relations between our species. The negotiations took several hours. In the end, it was agreed that Zira would serve a trial period as cultural liaison. She would spend 6 months working with human diplomatic corps, then return to Kalari space to present her findings to their government. When the Kalari delegation left, Zira stood with Jake on the observation deck, watching their ship depart. She looked different now, more confident and purposeful. Are you sure about this? Jake asked. It will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile is easy, she replied. But I have learned something important from humans. What is that? That sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Jake smiled. You are starting to sound like one of us. Zira laughed, a sound Jake had never heard from her before. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. 6 months later, Jake received a message from Zira. She was back in Kalari space, working with their government to establish formal relations with humanity. Her reports about human culture had caused great debate among her people, but slowly minds were beginning to change. The message included a video recording of Zira addressing the Kalari High Council. Jake watched as she stood before hundreds of her people and spoke with passion about the humans she had come to know. The galaxy fears humanity not because they are monsters, she said, but because their compassion threatens those who would be monsters. They are the species that stands between the strong and the weak, between the oppressor and the oppressed. They are not our enemies. They are the guardians we never knew we needed. Jake turned off the recording and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Zira was working to change her people's understanding of humanity. And maybe, just maybe, she would succeed in building the bridge between their species that both peoples needed. The girl who had once been given to him, as food had become something far more valuable. She had become an ambassador of understanding, carrying the truth about humanity to a galaxy that had forgotten what real strength looked like. And Jake knew that this was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had imagined.